Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. I hope you're having a phenomenal day. We're taking a quick look here at Bitcoin, sweeping its lower liquidation range, almost done with that heavy pocket of liquidation we talked about yesterday. So it's good news. Glad we were patient and waited there. Obviously, there were some opportunities in the short term for that little pump. Of course, we saw yesterday too, so congrats on that as well. But for the most part today, we're going to focus a little bit more so on just talking about ETF net outflows. Obviously, making sure you like, subscribe, and follow. That's an important thing too. And then obviously the order blocks here too, because this is constantly shifting here, but there was at some point, actually still here, a lot more buy orders below the price than above, right? And that kind of suggests support. We're entering support when there's a ton of liquidation, or more specifically, those liquidation levels have been hit. And obviously that that amount of order blocks are super high to the downside. All that said, stablecoin dominance is shooting up. We're going to discuss that as well. So we got a good one today. Be sure to stick around. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, we got some good news here, starting off with that liquidation range getting swept here for Bitcoin. Majority, if not all of that, at 86,000 is totally gone now. We'll double check a few things here, but for the most part, this is a very positive sign. What's also positive is hitting that like button, maybe even commenting below, really helping show your support with the channel. Really appreciate you doing that. We got a lot of new members. I think you just kind of easily forget to do that. Just like every time, and we're good. Thanks again. All right, so take a look here at the total market. This is basically the Bitcoin spot ETF net inflow and outflows, of course. We can see there's a significant amount of outflows recently, but this doesn't have like a direct correlation with the bottom, but it does tell us here more specifically that the longer we spend in these ETF net outflow ranges, the more likely we are to pivot and bounce based on the fear and greed index being so low, right? Last time, if you saw my video here, the last couple of days, I've actually been mentioning that February to April timeframe, when Trump, started to shake things up in office, we had a lot of ETF net outflows at the time. Price of Bitcoin was down as low as about 80,000. Now we're seeing very similar scenarios here as well, minus Trump not being the culprit there per se. There's a lot of crazy nonsense in the world right now. And for the most part, we're seeing Bitcoin coming closer to that range. So I'm thinking, 75 to 80K would be a worst case scenario for us here to pivot and bounce off that level. But between now and then, we've been at about a month and a half of ETF net outflow average, but also a very significant amount of crypto fear and greed index being like in the teens, really low. I think we had a 9 recently. It's pretty bad. All that being said, take a look here. There's a lot of buy orders here, tremendous amount of support in the 85 to 86K range, right? So we see more buy orders than sell orders. Obviously, 87,000 is heavily guarded there for the moment, but I do think we're going to run back to the 88.5 range, and I'll discuss more here soon as to why I feel that way. All that being said, we take a look at stablecoin dominance. Just to touch on this here, it is shooting straight up, of course, as per usual. Altcoins are bleeding out for the most part, but a lot are starting to find their bottom, at least a good handful of them. Solana specifically is one of those. So we'll analyze that as well, but you can see ETH dominance on the bottom left here, not looking so strong. But Bitcoin dominance is pulling back too, so it basically tells us money's flowing away from everything and just going into stablecoin. And stablecoin dominance is at its highest point right now so far. It's over 10% of the total market. Okay, so that's a pretty big deal there. Taking a look here at liquidation, this is another reason why I feel like we're probably going to continue to progress upwards on the short term for a relief rally. We're massively overextended on the 50 and the hourly time frames. We look here at the daily, we can recognize, let's actually refresh here. I think we got a little bit of a change, but we can see the late longs at 86,000. That's roughly where we're at. We got long at 86.5. And at this point here, we see a lot more liquidation above the price in the last 24 hours. And market makers have been really good about ripping the price up and down and just kind of destroying late longs and late shorts. So at this point, we are looking at this next area of about 88.5 to about 90,000 as a potential retest there for us. 7-day time frame tells us roughly the same, minus the more local 86,000, that small chunk that hasn't fully been swept. We see a lot more liquidation above the price. Okay, and the narrative remains the same on larger time frames too. So I'm not proposing we're going to see 100,000, but I do think the low 90s or upper 80s is going to be a strong, distinct probability in the immediate future. Just to quickly note here, let's quickly get a refresh. We're at a 15 on fear and greed index. Again, the longer we sustain that, the better. That's one of those buy the fear, and or opposite, of course, is sell the greed, which we're not even remotely close to greedy right now. We did have our first positive day of ETF net inflow here on the 18th. That was 2 days ago, of course. So it'd put us on that was on Tuesday, and that basically just tells us that we had a good market day. Money's kind of coming back in. It's not like just flowing away. Right? People are starting to buy these dips, specifically large institutions. Okay, so we can kind of get into that a little bit later, of course, but For the most part, these are all generally favorable signs for a short-term recovery. All that said, taking a look at the back-end data here for Bitcoin, just to kind of clarify, here is that quick little summarization for the Fear and Greed Index. As you can see down here, this is that 2-month stint we spent between February and April before the price rallied from 80,000 to roughly 120,000 in about 2 or 3 months, right? So not saying we're just going to instantly recover and bounce up from here, go that high, but I can say though that we're reaching a tentative bottom with this Fear and Greed Index being so low at this point. That's a pretty significant indication that we should be buying some of these dips here. I'm appreciating the fact that I'm getting filled on some limit orders that I've had open for a while on Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and even, yes, just a little bit of XRP and SUI. So all that being said, taking a look here at Bitcoin, we can recognize 92 to 90,000 is that local area of resistance. Safe to say that we're going to have some slowing pressure when we get there, if we were to get there. We are starting to see a descending broadening wedge pattern. Those are generally bullish on the short term, of course, just for a short-term reversal. So I'm willing to speculate 90,000 is probably going to be on the docket here for the near future. All that said, liquidation delta is still quite high to the downside. We're at 12 billion. So again, bears are still in control. Don't don't even think for a moment here that we're back on track. But we are in a position right now where we're going to see that capitulation. We zoom in here to our last 1 month. This is a 1 month macro liquidation. Pretty much everything was hit here fully. There's a super tiny chunk of 86,000, which is basically just that's chump change right now for the whales, because look at all this billions of dollars that they totally liquidated. So they're feeling pretty good, feeling fat and sassy right now. Moving on to, I wouldn't say pump the price, but they're buying these dips here. We'll just put it that way. Okay. All that being said, let's take a look at the daily time frame for Bitcoin. Just kind of recognize that we did sweep that liquidation range. We're at a 9+1 on TD sequential. We've been moving for 10 days straight in the same direction. And if you've ever analyzed Bitcoin's history, just in general, based on overextensions, I touched on this yesterday. Most of the times we hit a 9 or an 8 on TD sequential, the price will reverse itself. Okay, we see this trend over and over and over again. It's a pretty consistent one. Okay, so for the most part, we're seeing a lot of reasons why the price action is hitting its local bottom based on just significant overextensions, right? So just some things to be kind of mindful of. But the truth of this situation is everything's fully bearish. You shouldn't be taking along with extreme confidence or along with large movements or significant returns. What I mean by that is don't take along at 86.5, for example, if you followed my trade there, and try to take a profit target at 95, 100,000. We're not in that market right now, folks. Tight margins, preferably lower leverage, and specifically low position size. That's how you're going to survive these kind of trends. Okay, so that's kind of the concept there. Daily time frame is still terrible. 4 hours also terrible. But these are all more reasons why the price will probably capitulate, because everyone's scared out of their mind right now, and they're too scared to buy, or they don't have any dry powder left. And the market makers are just chumming the waters right now. Right. All that said, 4 hour time frame also looks pretty terrible here. No massive overextensions, hitting 30 on the RSI. Generally a common pivot point there. Money flow index is high regarding the RSI, or at least in comparison with it, basically telling us that we're seeing a little bit more strength. Generally, the money flow index will start to increase before the RSI as an early sign of lowering, or basically bottom. It's the last leg down generally has that kind of trend. Not saying we're going to just go up from here, but I do think, once again, that short-term rally will happen. We are also MACD diverging here too, so from a 4 hour standpoint, that's generally not good from a momentum scenario here. So taking a look here at the 1 hour, not much note except for our price moving average range percentile. This PMARP, this basically tells us, this big green bar lets us know that's a buying opportunity because it's super massively overextended. We're at a 9+4. So we've been moving for 14 candles in the same 4 hour direction. In other words, 14 4 hour candles in the same direction. I don't know what the math is on that. 36 plus 12, what, 48? No, 52 hours, maybe? We've been moving too far in the same direction without correction. And generally speaking, the price will inevitably revive itself because it's so massively overextended. It's a little more visible here on the 15. We're starting to see higher volume flowing in to this local bottom. And if you kind of look here, this is a scenario I sent out for my trade based on kind of areas of rejection. We're expecting rejection or resistance at 88.5. That's the previous bottom, previous low that hasn't been retested as a new high. Furthermore, too, if we break through that level, 0.5 fib level at approximately that $90,000 psychological resistance. So those are the two targets that I'm looking for. Obviously, you're going to secure profits just below that. Don't make it 90,000, make it 89.9, and that, maybe you might have a bit better luck because you won't be in a long line to get filled. You'll be right in front. Okay, so those are kind of just some things there. Anyways, that's where Bitcoin's at. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know. All right, folks, let's jump right into Ethereum here, kind of see what's going on with this chart. We're obviously hitting that local bottom once more at that $2,800 range we talked about yesterday. I'm not saying that this is like an area we're going to specifically bounce, but just to kind of give you the bumper sticker, we got some golden pocket support at 2640, upwards of 2750. So that is kind of that local support there. So anywhere between 26 and 2800, I feel like the price of Ethereum should start to normalize. It does require Bitcoin to stop, pulling back, of course, but under the impression Bitcoin does start to sustain its current range, as we already discussed, there's a good chance we see a pivot and a bounce here for ETH. But there's no doubt the side-by-side comparison with Bitcoin is still pretty bad. It's not quite as aggressive as Bitcoin with the pullback, but it's still it's par for the course for most altcoins today. Most altcoins are pulling back 6 to 10%. And that's just kind of where we're at there. So nothing amazing here for Ethereum, but let's quickly do our due diligence and see. Roughly every $100, we saw these areas of open interest yesterday. That's kind of changed a little bit, but we can presume that 2,900 and 3,000 are going to be our resistance for us based on previous numbers and just general psychological resistances. All that said, liquidation delta is at 10 billion, so nothing amazing here. There is more liquidation. Let's quickly refresh to make sure that we have the right numbers here. We can see, just a small amount of liquidation left at 2,800 to 2,750. This is the last 7 days of liquidation, basically just telling us that we're in a position where, we keep seeing these rinse and repeats here. Just every time the liquidation piles up, the liquidation gets swept. So leverage is really the big problem here, folks. Try not to use so much leverage, and you'll have less of a target on your back. It's really a simple way to understand it. Or just don't use leverage at all. But I don't think we're ever going to live in a world like that again, okay? Because money is made off leverage and liquidation with exchanges. So they're basically the problem. But I would say that people are the problem too here. Over leveraging causes these kind of issues there because market makers just again, they chum the waters. So daily time frame. Macro perspective, we're still in our descending trend, but just to clarify, from our previous low here in April of 25 this year, we can see 1360 was that low, and the all-time high of 4960. That's essentially where our fib levels are drawn out here, right? So that's the macro structure. Therefore, 26 to 2800 loosely is that range of support that we're going to be seeing here soon. Not only is it a previous high range, but also we have some volume as low as 2500. So I'd say 2500 is worst case scenario. I've got a pretty significant limit order there for Ethereum, just above 2505, I think it is, but in that range is kind of where I'm looking at to dollar cost average. So soon, I think it's probably going to be advantageous to consider doing so. Between now and then, there's nothing to write home about here. I don't see anything significant or amazing here with Ethereum. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, Bitunix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, taking a look here at Solana. This is the shining star here, and I say that in loosely because it's a coin we've been taking some good profits on here recently. As a matter of fact, take a quick look. We can see we took some profits on our ETH and Solana longs. That was 48 hours ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. But the concept here is that these coins no longer, Ethereum no longer, but Solana specifically is ranging very well. So if you take a look here, this is what the kind of trades you want to take, right? You just buy the bottom and sell the top. So this is basically range-bound trading 101. So at this point here, even though we didn't come all the way down, we're kind of in a slightly ascending trend, which is still a bullish sign. For the most part, we can see we're starting to average in higher. Okay, so for lack of better terms, you compare this with Bitcoin on the left, Solana on the right. It's definitely one of the only coins that isn't ripping down, even though, yes, we saw a significant candle from 138 to 132. The bottom is basically starting to reinforce its support at 128 to 132. So I talked about this yesterday, talk about it again today. We're in a long on Solana at 131. Got kind of lucky with that candle wick on one exchange. I think some folks got filled at 132. But the concept here is that it makes sense for Solana to recover with Bitcoin. Both coins, and I'm sure most altcoins too, have a significant fair value gap that needs to get filled. All right. So I think we're due to see a little bit of a capitulation here back to the upside. It's not going to be back to the metaphorical moon, of course. We're a long ways away from that, but early signs of reversal here are present for Solana. So I really like what I see here. Taking a look at the backend data. Let's double check this here. Once more, support range between 130 and 145. I highlighted this in my trade alerts. Make sure you pay attention to this here, of course. These are always things I kind of explain why I take the trades that I take. You're not just blindly shooting into the dark here, with my trades. I always have a good evaluated reason. And this tells us here that, liquidation is at 145. There's a ton of it just above the price action here with very little below, okay? So that's how range-bound trading works. It accumulates liquidation above and below those support ranges. Typically, you'll see a sweep in both areas. At this point, 145 was never fully hit, and there's a strong chance with this capitulation we're due to come back. Now, liquidation delta is still high to 1 billion. That's not a lot for this coin, but it is implying that the bears are moderately in control. But that does require Bitcoin to kind of stabilize. Bitcoin can run towards 88.5 like I'm expecting, then I think Solana will hit 138 to 140 quite easily. So those are just kind of the scenarios here that I'm looking at. Overall, daily time frame for Solana is still not great. I mean, every coin is going to look terrible in the macro, but for the most part, this coin is really starting to find its bottom in this current range, once more of 130 to 145 loosely. We're still in a descending trend, both on the larger and lower time frames, so don't mistake the fact that Solana is still in the doghouse as with most altcoins, but it's one of the coins here that's closer to breaking free from its local moving averages, the 50 and the 20-day SMA, which are running consistent with that descending trend. So those are all positive signs. However, we do have a massive point of control at 141. So if you're going to take that long at 130, 132, like I recommended there, then it's one of those situations where you want to make sure to secure profits right away. Okay, it's just easy as that. All that said, looking pretty good here in the overall sense. I like what I see here for Solana. All right, popping on over to SUI. Just to double check here, this coin is still on the dicey side, folks. There's nothing great about this. I do think it's more likely to respond well to the current market conditions based on Bitcoin tentatively bottoming out after hitting that liquidation range. But let's just double check, because as of yesterday, SUI was looking quite poor. I didn't really recommend any kind of trades of this coin. Taking a look here at 164, we can see that is the current area of open interest resistance there above the price. So 164 is essentially that range between 164 and 165. So those are the two resistance ranges for SUI at the moment. So just clarifying, if the price were to recover to those ranges, there's a good chance we'll see some slowing pressure. But the thing that concerns me the most about this coin, unlike most other coins, is the amount of liquidation still piled up at 130 to 155, or sorry, 130 to 150. Imagine being somebody on a long position for SUI from months ago, and you're still so stubborn, you holding your position open, you're currently in the red, and you're about to get liquidated because you didn't take profit. That is not what you do, folks. That's not how you trade. Well, it is how a lot of people trade, actually, but it's not how you're supposed to trade, because you do realize that you have to take profits in order to be a profitable person, profitable trader, however you want to put it. So I'm just kind of emphasizing that because so many people come over to my community that are just completely destroyed, and our whole common narrative in our community is to make sure to just add, just trim your position, take some profit out, maybe let the rest ride if you want, but for the most part, make sure you're securing profits when you can. It's super important in this market. We're not in a hold on for dear life kind of market anymore. I mean, that's basically what people are doing, but if you are doing it, you're doing it wrong because you're just getting absolutely hammered. So suffice to say, SUI doesn't look great on the back end. We're still in a descending trend. I want to see if we can reclaim that 160, 170 range first before considering a long, or more so importantly, just break above any of our local highs. We still have yet to establish a higher high. So those are things that need to happen first. Looking at all the rest of the stuff here doesn't tell us too much. We're seeing what, a fourth, I don't know what goes past tertiary. Is it quadrary, where we have a fourth stochastic swing to the downside? That's generally unfavorable. All right, those basically tells us we have terrible momentum. MACD's diverging. These are just not great signs. So I don't really like what I see here, daily or macro. The only saving grace, just so you know, and this is consistent with a lot of coins, is the 9 on TD sequential. We're seeing basically 10 days of overextension. Bitcoin has the same thing going for itself, which basically implies SUI is running consistent in a lot of ways with Bitcoin. Right? So that's not the kind of coin you want to invest in short term. Perhaps long term, add to your spot bag between 150 and 130, but that big liquidation chunk at 130 to 140, that lower range, tells me we got a little bit more downside for SUI. I hope I'm wrong, the price goes up. That's where we're at. Okay, take a look here at XRP. The simple way to understand it, very similar scenario. Most coins are overextended on the daily. So XRP isn't anything fantastic on the daily time frame. Where it does shine a little bit is on the lower time frames, at least as of recently, which absolutely not the case anymore. Let's forget I even said that. Let's double check the back end, because once again, folks, things change in the market. You got to reevaluate consistently. So when you get into the market and you jump on over to a to take a trade, for example, you want to make sure that you're taking trades with coins that are outperforming versus Bitcoin, but also you want to know what Bitcoin is doing before you take any trades. That's a simple way to understand it. It's why we evaluate Bitcoin in every single video. It's just the way it goes. It has to be. I wish it wasn't the case. It would be amazing if you could just trade altcoins independently of Bitcoin, but it kind of gives you an advantage when you think about it. If you identify the differences between these coins, you actually had a strong advantage for the most part. All that said, that's kind of how we do it. Quick little notification here. Looks like we just got some nice profit there too for Solana, 16%. It's not the greatest. But 51 minutes, it's not too bad, honestly. I think we got a little bit left there in the tank for that one. All that said, quickly to note here on the back end for XRP, significant areas of resistance at 225, 215, and 210. Those aren't very strong, but I would say 227 is that big chunk. Liquidation delta is still high to the downside. Majority local liquidation has been swept here. Let's quickly refresh. We can see all those $2 idiots who just got hit hard. Now, that sounds contradictory, and I'm not calling you an idiot if you had a liquidation event there. It's just that you don't want to set stop losses or have a liquidation event at key levels, which are macro support ranges. In other words, $2 is highly contested. That's the area where people are trying to average in the most. We have the most buying pressure there. But the whales know that, right? So they're going to probably hit 198, 194, 195, and then pull the price back up, therefore reinforcing the fact that setting a stop loss at a key level support is a bad idea. Invalidation levels are totally different if you're playing it tight, but with a looser trade, you're holding for longer time, so you don't want to do that because you'll get wicked out. Anyways, I make it sound easier than it is. It's not always the case, but there's a pretty common theme there. 4-hour time frame's not really showing too much here. We have a third stochastic swing to the downside here in this downtrend. It's not really performing versus Bitcoin very well. So XRP doesn't have my vote at this point to take a consideration or to consider taking along. But what I can say is that $2 is that macro support range. There's a solid chance we hold this level if Bitcoin can hold 86, 87K today. And that's a very tentative scenario. But once more, overextension with an 8 on TDS, I think there's a decent chance we start to rally back within reason a little bit here, quite possibly this weekend. I foresee this weekend being green if we can have no more nonsense leading into the weekend. If we see a 24-hour period of consolidation at 87,000 for Bitcoin, I think a lot of alts will start to surge, partially because of this Bitcoin dominance scenario here. I really think that stablecoin dominance is going to decrease and money's going to flow away from stable and go into alts. It's kind of generally how it's been working as long as Bitcoin dominance goes sideways. And we've seen that so far for a couple of days. So we're kind of on the edge of greatness here, but I don't think it's going to be amazing. All right, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Comment below.